So I will repost it for you.
And the YouTubes
All right.
and Facebook. I'll have
Fake
some of
book.
my.
Bookface, something I don't use. All right.
All right, I've got a link here for YouTube. Just gonna
Okay.
tweet that out. Live with BJ Dichter to discuss Bitcoin and the Freedom Convoy. Join us. How's that sound?
Sounds good. I would say I don't. I usually put spokesperson because there were so many
Spokesperson.
organizers. Yeah, and I don't
Well,
want
let's
it to
get
be
into it.
like okay.
Let's get into that because we're live. There's two people watching. So, BJ Dichter, thanks for coming on the Magic Internet Money podcast. I was excited to kind of talk to somebody about the Freedom Convoy from the perspective of the organizers, or what did you call yourself?
Spokesperson. So
The
there were so many.
spokesperson.
Yeah, yeah. The voice, I guess, if you will, that Tamara asked me to be.
So I was, like many Canadians, I was
Mm.
not aware of the Freedom Convoy until it actually got moving and you started seeing these images of a lot of people supporting the truckers coming through to Ottawa by going over the bridges with signs and stuff like that. I'd
Mm-hmm.
never heard of you. I'd never heard of Tamara. I never heard of like the other Chris Barber, I think was another guy. And then
Yeah.
there was a whole bunch of folks that were kind of like raising money through the GoFundMe and the Give Send Go and then the Bitcoin fundraisers. So I hadn't heard of you before this. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about your history, and more so because you're a Bitcoiner, and so therefore we share some kind of foundational principles of sound money and how to think about things from that perspective. I don't really find that I relate with any of the other spokespeople or organizers or whatever of the protests too much.
Hmm. Okay.
Like there was one guy, Alex something or another, like Transplender on Twitter, who had some pretty interesting live streams, but as I understand, he wasn't like officially like a spokesperson or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for coming on the show, and would like to start with like maybe could you tell me how you got to the point where you got into Bitcoin?
Oh wow. So I started in Bitcoin. We'll say in Bitcoin in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, 15, 16, that area. So I saw the whole, parabolic spike, and saw the divide and all the conflict within the world, which was really good for me because it helped regular people like me understand the different perspectives on block size. So a little bit of I'll go back a little bit of perspective. I mean, I'm not a programmer by any means, but I've had a computer since I was 3 years old. I started with a PET emulator and a Commodore 64 and all the way up. So I have an understanding of programming and how it works. I'm the worst programmer in the world, you know. So I've always had that side of me where I've been very much engaged in tech and interested in computers and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of a natural thing around that time, around 2015. I don't remember how I stumbled across it. I really don't. I do remember in the back of my head one of my employees mentioning it in 2010, just in passing, that, oh, there's this thing called Bitcoin, and like everybody else, like, oh yeah, just whatever, magic internet money, and that's it. He just didn't. I unfortunately didn't have what I think I've improved, the intellectual um, curiosity to say, hey, I should look into this, and I really should have. So finally, the word Bitcoin came again on my radar around 14, 15, and I started just to read a little bit from time to time passively, just, killing time. What's this Bitcoin thing? And then the rabbit hole starts, and it starts, and you get deeper and deeper into it slowly over time. I really took a long time to do it. And you could really become proficient in Bitcoin, I think, within a few months. I really took 18 months because I was so busy with other things in my life and whatever. Became kind of a side hobby. And I don't remember at what point, but we all have that eureka moment where we've ingested all this information that we don't understand. And how does this fit together? It's kind of like Stephen Hicks's podcasts are like that. He lays out a bunch of chunks, and you're like, what is he talking about? And then, boom, he says one sentence that makes it all click together. And I had that eureka moment around late 15, 16-ish, and I started to see what was going on. So it was just a passing hobby. I wasn't
What
looking.
was it like in 2010 that you were doing? You said one of your employees mentioned it to you. What was your business back in 2010?
Oh, I had a business on Ryerson University's campus. We had a graphic arts business.
Okay.
So I mean, adding more to my interest in computers, but on the kind of digital art side. Um, and one of my employees was he was from Russia, and he was a computer scientist back home. And he explained, he's the one who brought it up, but he was more skeptical as well. So that's why, I just okay, yeah, whatever. I've moved on. So,
So you were I guess let's kind of talk about your background a little bit. So you're an entrepreneur still, or you were, and now, like, what do you do now? I think you have a podcast network, don't you?
yeah, I started as a gemologist and a diamond grader at a school. That's what I went to school for.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
yeah, so I've
You
done
never
a
you never
whole.
got into Bitcoin mining?
It's funny you mentioned that because for the past, I get into things slowly. Yeah, I'm starting to.
Sorry for technical difficulties. BJ's got
Yes.
some lawnmowers outside and some wind chimes going,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
roommates.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um. The where was my
Bitcoin
thought?
mining. You're
Yeah.
talking about.
So much like I got into Bitcoin slowly, I'm been trying to get into Bitcoin mining slowly, and I really want to get into it. That's what I'm hoping. One of the big things I'm trying to get out of this conference is to get a better handle on mining. Like I've been watching Compass mining. I've looked at, should I get some servers and rent space, or should I do it on my own? And then, I mean, we know the amount of investment required to do it on your home is just not worth it at this point. You need to have something a little bit more scalable.
Yeah, if you
So,
want to make a professional career out of it, you need to have some resources for sure. If you want to just like help decentralize the network and maybe play the Bitcoin lottery, you can run an ASIC or two at your home in your garage or something like that. That's
well,
more like
I set up a node, and I thought that was a major accomplishment for myself at
that's
home.
great.
But the problem is, I don't know. I also don't know Lightning, and I didn't really. This is the other thing I want to get from the conference is a better understanding of Lightning and talk to the Lightning developers.
Right.
Is because I don't intend on spending my Bitcoin for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so I really didn't see the need for it. But now we're starting to see, like with the Freedom Convoy showed me the importance and the value of having layer two money on the Bitcoin network. So that and mining are the two things I want to get into next.
Okay, so you went to school for gemology, and what made you go down that path? I'm curious.
The science part of it, I was never into, as you can tell, I'm not into jewelry. I never really was, as most gemologists are not, by the way. But it was the science component of it. Gemology is, despite what people think, a lot of physics and chemistry, and so that's really what got me into it. Oh, they're back now.
The
They're
lawnmowers.
right in front of my place, like right in front of it.
Well,
Uh,
you can't hear it too bad, actually. You
okay,
must have
good,
some good noise canceling headphones.
cool, awesome. I'm glad to hear
Uh,
that because
yeah, you barely hear it. So
they'll
you got
finish in
into it
about five
because
minutes.
the science side of it was interesting to you,
The science
and
side, and I had an extended family member who was a gemologist in the United States, and so it'd be interesting. And so I just went with it and ended up working in the field for 4.5 years.
what did you go like? outside of Canada, or were you working in the field in Canada? How did that work?
Predominantly in Canada. I mean, I was working under a site under a diamond buyer for a large manufacturer. Then I ended up working for a big conglomerate, which took me out of Canada a little bit, but I was predominantly based in Canada.
So what kind of gems were you looking for?
Oh, here's coming right up to my. They'll be done in a few minutes. Um, I mean, I specialized in diamond grading, so you start to
Okay.
learn gemology, and then you kind of pick where do you want to go. And I found the diamond industry interesting. So then you had that sort of intersection between business and science. That's what I saw with the diamond industry itself. So I specialized in.
So did you ever find like a really big diamond or anything?
Well, I didn't fall. I didn't go in the ground to dig them up,
Okay, what were you
but
doing then? That's what I was picturing. You were like digging up for diamonds.
the first job I had in the industry, I was grading. So what happens is a diamond buyer will go to buy what's called a site because they were a site holder at the CSO in England, and they'll buy. I mean, you talk about it's the polar opposite of Bitcoin in terms of lack of transparency. You bid on a box of diamonds, a rough diamonds. You have no idea what's in there. Nobody does apparently, and you just got to bid on it. And then when you bring that box back to your office and you start sorting the diamonds, you hope that there are some gems in there that make it worthwhile. It's called tweezer profit, right? But you invest so much time in grabbing each diamond and sorting them based on their color and quality and all that sort of stuff and size. And then you hope at the end of that whole process, you have those magical 1 carat or 2 carat on the nose diamonds, which is where the money is from a market standpoint.
So it's kind of like that show where those people go and buy old abandoned storage units and then
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Yeah,
try to find artwork or something, some valuable
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've got a friend that his dad was a big up partner or something in De Beers, and I remember learning a little bit about that. And yeah, kind of what a funny scam that is, eh? The whole diamond industry that they've been able to use marketing to convince the entire world that diamonds are rare and scarce and valuable.
Yeah, well, that's why when people say to me, "Oh, well, Bitcoin has no intrinsic value," I say, "Well, what about diamonds?" I mean, that's the whole point. Is the Bitcoin's value is its scarcity, and the diamond industry has created artificial scarcity, but it's the scarcity that gives it value. That's the whole point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So like when when you were working on that, did it um were they growing them in labs yet?
Yes, yeah, they were. They were just. I mean, they were all colored and had certain imperfections. Like most diamonds that you'll see on industrial tooling, like diamond tipped saws, for example, those are all manufactured diamond. They're not natural
Okay.
diamonds. Because the problem with diamonds is when you try to grow them, I mean, they've improved the process significantly since I got out of the industry. But at that
Right.
time, you were lucky if you got a Yellowstone. Most of them were just, they look like black onyx, and that's what's used for tooling. But yeah, it's been around for a while, actually.
So somebody's telling me that my volume is low. I just adjusted it. Nomad, can you post again and tell me if it's fine now? I
It's
must
like
have
we're
had a
watching.
setting.
It's like we're watching Scott Adams, where half his audience always complains about the volume.
All right, so I can actually hear myself now in your thing, so maybe I'm too loud. I'm going to turn myself down a little bit here.
All right.
Let me do automatic. We'll see what happens there. I'll click the automatic button.
Okay.
Okay, so like I love to understand where someone comes from their previous experience and then their framework that like they've been thinking about to lead them to Bitcoin. So,
Mhm.
you worked as a gemologist, you were interested in the science, you worked in the field for a while, then you went to Ryerson to start a
Oh no,
printing
no,
business.
we're going to be here for a long time. We're going to go through everything. I got out of I got out of the jewelry industry because I invented a product for motorcycles, and
Oh
I
wow.
decided to go through this process of getting a utility patent as opposed to a design patent. And that was, I was young at the time. I was what, 25 years old, I think. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine saying, you think I should leave the jewelry industry, which I wasn't terribly happy with at that time, and try to pursue this or not? And this friend of mine said, you're not going to be able to do it when you're 50 years old and you have 3 kids. So now's the time to do it. So left that, went down this path into the motorcycle industry, which I ended up working for Harley Davidson
Wow.
in Toronto, and as a result of it, first came down here to Florida, then back to Miami, and then ended up in the print industry. I ended up being the sales director for a company that had 30 stores across the country. I guess that's where I got most of my PR and marketing education, I guess you'd say.
Right.
And then went and built my own business that was tangentially related. Got out of that a few years ago. Started a podcast network. Bought a truck as a side hustle when COVID got out of control, just to get out of the city and explore the U. And it's amazing. It's like backpacking. I treat it like backpacking across the U.S. It's amazing. I absolutely love it. And who knew that would lead to what happened last month in the largest peaceful demonstration in Canadian history and the largest convoy in human history. It's great.
Yeah, that's funny. Like I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of felt the calling to just get a driving job for fun. So I can
Yeah.
relate. I can relate, but I never did it. Wife
Okay.
wasn't too interested in having me do that, and
Yeah.
I gave up on it. What I ended up doing instead was getting an RV, and
Oh, awesome.
kind of yeah. So last 2 years or a year or two ago, we got the RV and drove across Canada. That was real
Cool.
fun. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really fun.
I
Don't have my
imagine.
air brakes license yet, but I'm working on that.
Awesome.
Imagine you need all that stuff in order to drive a truck.
Yeah. Well, when I got my license, it was after I got out of the business at Ryerson. And by the way, just that was the warning sign for me, because I was dealing with the student body and the faculty, of course, for some of our corporate clients. And I saw the shift in our society. Like, I'm not, despite what the fake news says, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not terribly right wing. Like, yeah, on some, it depends on the issue, right? Like I said with Michaela Peterson, we're all a mix of liberal, conservative, libertarian. Just depends on the issues, and we bounce. We're
Hmm.
not one thing. But I saw that shift to extremist activism in the material that we were printing
Oh,
in
really?
my business. Yeah, and it got scary. It's getting worse and worse every year. And then the big change, and I try to stay away from identity politics. I'm Canadian first,
Hmm.
but one of the faculty members at Ryerson University got wind that I was Jewish and that I had some, certain political viewpoints that she didn't like, and apparently spread this around to all the faculty in Ryerson University, and all of a sudden, all my corporate clients dried up, and that's when I realized, okay, all these, postmodernist posters that were printing, on a regular basis, and some stuff I was starting to turn away because it was so extreme. I realized, okay, this is a bigger problem than I thought, and it's time for me to get out.
That was like 2019 or something, or
No, that was 2015,
oh,
16,
okay,
something around the
a
time
while
where I was
back,
getting into Bitcoin and whatever.
right?
Yeah.
So, did you have any kind of previous, like, before you got into Bitcoin, 2015, 16, did you go down the money rabbit hole before, or was that kind of like your experience going down the rabbit hole of what money is, was when you started digging into Bitcoin a bit more?
I'm pretty fortunate in that my dad was a school teacher who taught business and accounting, and I never took to it, but I always had a basic understanding because it was there at the dinner table, sort of thing. And my brother became he's in the financial sector. He's a CFA, he's a financial analyst. So in my family, an understanding of just markets and how they work. You just couldn't avoid it. It
Mhm.
would be topic of conversation periodically, and you'd always pick it up. In terms of monetary policy and the Fed and how that all works, I was always a little bit interested in it. I remember watching Bill Still's The Money Changers, which is from, I don't know, sometime in 1970s because everything was brown. But and it was a long documentary, if I remember, it's something like 8 hours long about how the monetary system works and fiat currencies. Although they didn't refer to them as fiat, but and I learned that, I don't know, 20 years ago, like a while ago, just because I've always been interested in documentaries. I don't watch TV. I watch documentaries and read books and stuff.
Right.
So that was, I guess, the seed. So having that background knowledge and then coming across this Bitcoin thing, getting on my radar in 2015, it was just kind of a natural, oh, hey, maybe that's plugging some holes from what I learned many years ago watching that entire documentary binge watching it over a weekend.
That's cool. So you kind of had it like in the back of your mind that there was something wrong with the money system and the
Oh, yeah,
banking
yeah, for
system.
sure. Yeah,
And then
100%.
like it was, were you into like gold and scarce resources and stuff like that before you had found Bitcoin, or was Bitcoin the first kind of
Bitcoin was the
investment?
first one. I've never been. I mean, I don't disparage people who are into gold. Like I understand its historical significance, but have you ever tried to stuff your pockets with gold? Like it's not. This is what Peter Schiff doesn't understand. And by the way, I love Peter Schiff. I think he's a moron with Bitcoin, but he's entertaining, and I think that's the shtick. I think that's intentional. That he
Yeah.
just trolls Bitcoin, and that's what he's made his reputation on. But I look at that guy and I see I'm going to be one of the few Bitcoiners in the world to defend Peter Schiff, even with all his nonsense, just because of, remember Occupy Wall Street, when he went down with a camera and a microphone, and he actually spoke to them and explained to them the importance of free market. Um, I always admire him for that. That was great. So all the other stupidity with Bitcoin, I just laugh and I just kind of attribute to, yeah, that's just his way of getting his face in front of the camera. That's all he's doing.
Yeah, I agree with you there, man. Peter Schiff is one of the folks that, one of the many, probably like dozen people or so that influenced me when I was younger about how to think
Yeah.
about money and how to think about political issues and things like that. So I attribute my decision to buy some Bitcoin in 2011 to Peter Schiff. So
We'll
thanks,
send him
Peter.
that in a tweet.
Thanks, Peter.
Exactly.
And
So
I invested in Amber, which is an exchange in the Australia,
yeah,
which is kind of like the Swan Bitcoin or Cash App or whatever of Australia.
yeah.
And the founder Alex Svetsky built a feature into Amber where whenever Peter Schiff tweets about Bitcoin, you stacks some Bitcoin for you.
That's awesome.
So it triggers a purchase of all these people's Bitcoin accounts whenever Peter Schiff tweets about Bitcoin.
I love it. I love
Yeah,
it. That's
yeah,
amazing. So yeah, in terms of precious metals, um, it was just I'm a techie, right? So that's analog storage of wealth. So yeah, I understand its importance and historical significance, but I dealt with it in the jewelry industry, and I was never even into the, like, you can also get into precious metals and gold and all that sort of stuff when you're in that industry, and it was just not really my thing. I understand it's
yeah.
important, but you know.
So you stopped doing the printer thing and then you went to do your business with motorcycle parts or whatever it
No,
was then?
no, reverse order. The motorcycle stuff was before the printing
I
business.
gotcha. Okay. And then now you're running the podcast network.
Yeah.
And how's that doing? Like, have you managed to grow that pretty good, or?
Yeah, it started as a hobby, just looking for stuff to do, and I always wanted to do some sort of business where I could be working from my laptop, that I could be anywhere in the world. I could be in Thailand, I can be in South America, whatever, and work remotely. That was really the motivation. And I was always into music as a kid. Like I played music by ear, multiple instruments. So that came in handy when it came to start to editing podcasts. So it was a little bit of a hobby. I just started to try. I tried and reached out to different people. Like I'm not one of the podcasters. I am going to be on the one we're set to launch that we've done a few episodes, News Talk Crypto. But that will be the first time. All the other platforms, I'm not one of the people. I'm not one of the speakers or podcasters. I'm just reached out to different people and tried to amplify them and build networks around them, knowing they already have an audience. Stephen Hicks is one of them. So for anybody who is admirer of Jordan Peterson, as I am too, you'll really like Stephen Hicks. Stephen is really a lot of the source. I don't think Jordan would disagree with me on this, but you could credit Stephen Hicks with a lot of the knowledge and the means to articulate the dangers of excessive postmodernism. That is Stephen Hicks's work. His book, Explaining Postmodernism, was really the foundation of it. And Jordan definitely references that material quite a lot. So Open
Okay.
College with Stephen Hicks is one of my podcasts. And man, I've learned a lot about philosophy from that guy. It's been
Cool.
amazing. Yeah.
Well, so then so was it the experience with the print shop and seeing all this material, and I guess just following people like Jordan Peterson, and was that what kind of got you politically activated, or were you always kind of into politics?
No, I hate politics, and I hate it even more now that I was involved in it for so long, and I guess I still am tangentially because a lot of politicians I'm still friends with kind of reach out to me, bounce ideas sometimes behind the scenes. During that period of having that business on the campus, that's when I got involved first in city politics because I saw that same narrative of extremism. I'm going to use that word extremism to one side. I saw that grow on the university campus, and then I saw certain city councilors parroting it. And that's when I thought, well, everyone complains and always says they want to do something about it. And I figured, yeah, let's give it a shot, right? Let's run for city council. It'll be a learning, like everything's a learning experience. Breaking my ankle was a learning experience. I've never broken anything before. So I figured, let's give it a shot and see what we can learn about politics. And I figured I'll just go along with it until I can't go any further or doors are closed in front of me or whatever. And just, I don't know, people keep trying to drag me in to the point that there was a rumor and a bunch of people trying to encourage me to run for leader of the Conservative Party. Oh, please, no, no, no. That's no. That's not. I'm done. I'm not doing that. Let's leave it. Let's just get competent political leaders. No, I'm not that guy, sort of thing. But so that's just it's always been there. And I guess because I'm not quite so partisan, there's people from different parties actually that reach out to me from time to time.
Right.
And so yeah, that's my limited involvement. And if you're ever thinking about going into politics, like don't. Just don't. It's the worst. You don't want to do it.
So what was your experience like in because you ran for well, what did you run for? The People's Party, was it?
No, no, I never. I
No.
ran for first. I did city council
Okay.
in Toronto, and then I ran for the Conservative Party in 2015,
Okay.
which was the election where Justin Trudeau ran. I was a
Okay.
candidate for them.
What were you running for, like a MP or
Yeah,
how? Okay.
yeah, just an MP in Danforth, and
How'd you do?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you put the political lens on, not bad. When I started, the Conservatives were at 4% in that riding, and I managed to bring them up to just around 10%,
Okay.
which was significant. And part of the reason was they never had a campaign office there, which I couldn't believe. So I demanded we at least have a campaign office so the community can come talk to us. But also, that community is pretty much on the identitarian identity politics spectrum. Is very big there,
Hmm.
and I may obviously, being a Bitcoiner, I'm fiscally prudent. Some people call fiscally conservative, but I'm not a social conservative. I have friends who are social conservatives, but I'm not. I'm very socially libertarian, extremely libertarian socially.
Right.
So when people, would come to meet me, oh, you hate, gay people, you hate this, whatever, and I'm like, well, I started LGBT with my friends who they are gay, and to make the party more libertarian on social issues.
Hmm.
So I don't know how you're concluding that I'm hateful towards anybody. And once I started to talk to more and more people started to talk to me, they realized, oh, he's not the big bad boogeyman conservative that certain members in the media like to paint that aren't even there. Like I said, I know a lot of social conservatives, and we may disagree on certain issues. Most of them are good people. They're nice people, different worldviews. Much like we have to accept different worldviews on, let's say, the more left side of the political spectrum, we also have to accept them on the more right
Yeah.
side. So yeah, because of that, I think that's what translated into having a favorable outcome. And one of the things that people did not like about me, and I'll say this is very controversial, but I kept getting snarled and attacked by people, the activist community in the
All right.
LGBT community. Not because I have a lot of friends in that community, but actual activists would try to smear me. And I remember I was at some event once where candidates were invited to speak, and I said, you know who the first person in North American politics to have a trans woman as their campaign manager was? It was me. And then they would all go silent, and the cognitive dissonance would kick in. And it's just because I found and met somebody along the way who was absolutely brilliant in just a brilliant thinker and a brilliant mind in terms of political strategy, and taught me so much. So I don't really care what her identity was. Yeah, again, I'm very libertarian as long as we're not going off a cliff, into identity politics. And it's funny what she said. This is the other thing that's very controversial. She said to me, with all the activists, she was very much against the activism in the community. And she said to me, I didn't go through all of this and uproot my entire life, going from a boardroom hawk to being somebody who's finally comfortable with her gender, to have a bunch of little snots tell me my gender is now fluid. She's like, no, 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 no. I had to change my driver's license. I had to change all my documentation, my name, everything. That's not fluid, right? And
Mm.
she was the most hardened person I had ever encountered in terms of people uh, are we have this what's the word I'm looking for, that we are gender bimorphic, that we have to, I can't remember the scientific terms. She was very hardened with
Oh
that
wow.
I was a man and now I'm a woman, and that's how it operates. And I met a bunch of her friends as well who had transitioned, and they all had the exact same worldview. And I realized that the activists don't represent communities; they represent political ideologies.
Do you have to deal? Did you have to deal with very much of that when you were running?
Not that much. Like, we all had a really good understanding, and I think she acted almost as like as a shield. Like, she would take on any activists that would start any sort of rumblings and attacks. And it was funny. I remember we're knocking on doors in buildings, And again, the nature of that neighborhood, that we would people would open the door and say, you're a conservative, you're hateful, homophobic, blah, 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 whatever, all the labels and that we see everywhere now. And I'd say, well, here's my campaign manager, Melissa. And she's so funny. She'd lift up her skirt and say, well, I'm a conservative. And then again, the cognitive dissonance would
she'd actually lift up her skirt.
Yeah, it was hysterical.
Oh my God.
Not all the way, just a little bit. Like, she was funny. She had a really good sense of humor. But
what's she doing right now? Is she still in
I
politics?
don't know. She got, like many of us, got very disillusioned with politics, as did I when I stepped away. I haven't spoken to her in quite a while. But again, if you're ever thinking about going into politics, don't. It's not what you think. Please do yourself a favor. Don't let it ruin those years of your lives.
You gotta, like the way I've always thought about politics was initially when I found out about money, when I found out that money was a big scam and the banking system is basically these unelected financial rulers that can interfere with the markets and set these crazy rules that make the rich richer, reward people that are politically close to the money printer, and punish the poor through high inflation and, bailouts and low interest rates for the banks, but high interest rates for the poor people. I mean, that's a real problem. Like, I grew up in poverty in Cape Breton, and we had like high interest rate credit cards, and poor people typically are always carrying a balance on their credit card, and they're just being wrecked on these high fees and overdraft charges that once you get up into the middle class, you kind of like don't have to deal with that much anymore. It's such a small percentage of your wealth that like it's a constant struggle to get out of poverty when you're in a system where money is actually debt and it's a predatory system on poor people, because a $10 overdraft charge is actually significant to somebody whose net worth is zero. Like $10 overdraft, 20% interest rate, like all that stuff is crazy. And then it affects your credit score. You can never get a high credit score, so your interest rates are always high. And then you're continually being pillaged by the banks. Meanwhile, they get bailed out when they make the same mistakes. And like it's just totally unfair to poor people. And then the liberals and the NDPs would like to kind of have those bleeding heart stuff about like social safety nets and, well, we got to print money to do this program or that program. And that is attractive to poor people because they think, oh, finally I'm going to get some like help here. But really what it's doing is it's causing high inflation, which makes it even harder for poor people to survive because their cost of living rises, but their wages aren't rising with that. And it's just like continually making the rich people rich because they are getting the benefits more than poor people. So
well, the only thing I would add to that is, one of my oldest friends is, since elementary school, is a mortgage broker. So I saw him go through starting off with, residential, moving on to commercial, and then, large cap commercial mortgage is what he deals with now. And I was always shocked, when you say, when were you interested in the monetary issue, and all these things, occurred throughout my life. And this is another example of watching him learn about the credit system, learn about the banking system. We'd go for coffee and talk about work and all that sort of stuff. And I was always amazed. He explained to me when he first got into, like, there's a certain level of properties he would deal with, like the higher end properties. People in the middle class are in the exact same boat. And, I know of 3 people I can think of who their combined income in their household is between $200,000 and $400,000, and they've been paycheck to paycheck for years.
Right.
Now, maybe their spending habits are a little bit ridiculous, or maybe everybody's buying big houses because there's so many regulations. I mean, George Gammon talks about this. It's not just in California, where a developer can't build small houses anymore. It's just not profitable. So I know a lot of people. I know statistically there's a large segment of the middle class that are in exactly the same situation, carrying large balances month to month on their credit card, And it's not just limited to poor people. It's now everybody is in this scenario. And I remember one statistic my friend told me, it was a while ago, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, let's say 8 years ago. He said to me, he was doing a review of all his client base, trying to find new clients and all that sort of stuff. He says, it's crazy, man. He said, we had a guy come to us who owns multiple investment properties, like he owned like small fourplex apartment buildings and stuff like that in Hamilton, in Toronto, all over the place. Yet when I do his net worth statement, his net worth is $5,000. And he said, and I started doing some digging, and I found some stats that in Canada at that time, only 10% of people earned more than $64,000 a year. So think about that. And I said to him, there's an awful lot of Mercedes and BMWs out there. Like, how is that the case? And he said, well, because they're all leveraged.
Yeah.
And it's exponentially worse in Florida. It's a good example of a massively leveraged economy, and we saw the result of that in 2007, 2008. I think that's where we're headed towards again.
Yeah, for sure. It's where our debt to GDP ratio in Canada is just insane. It's like one of the worst in the G20. It's like probably about 350% or so now. So meaning like for every dollar that Canadians earn, we owe like $3.50 in debt, which is just unimaginable to get out of that. It's just at this point, there's going to have to be some kind of debt jubilee or something like Bretton Woods 2.0 system where we just all agree that debts don't matter anymore because nobody's ever going to pay off their debts.
Yeah, it's scary.
At least on the government side and a lot of corporations. But
yeah,
the money system is totally messed up, and not even the people that study it, like economists and stuff, I don't even think they really understand the money system. So it's no surprise that middle class and poor people don't understand that the real problem with wealth inequality is not capitalism, it's government spending and unchecked money printing that's causing all these problems. Sure, there's like some problems with capitalism, like unchecked capitalism is not great either, but we don't live in a system of capitalism. We live in a system of like corrupt capitalism or counterfeit capitalism and corporate welfare and things like that. And like funny enough, Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister and the finance minister, wrote a book in 2012 all about this subject, and she called it cognitive state capture in the book. She identified when Wall Street and the banks are overtaken by when they get too much influence over the central bank and they're able to like write their own policies and bail themselves out and stuff. It's called cognitive state capture, according to her. That's what she defined it as. And then she basically is performing that same mission in Canada. So she identified the problem in her book in 2012, and then she somehow became the finance minister and is doing that in Canada.
Yeah.
So we've printed so much money during the pandemic, they won't even tell us how much money they've printed. Pierre Poilievre keeps trying to like ask questions about that, but never gets a straight answer as far as I've seen in the House. And all we know is that we're at least like one of the worst countries in the world when it comes to debt to GDP per capita, like how many people we have and how much debt we have. And, it's not all the fault of the politicians. Culture has also created this consumerism thing where we're all encouraged, like you said, to go out and leverage up and buy new cars and whatever thing that you possibly think you need because that'll help the economy. And it just leads to the situation where everybody's in debt. Poor people are affected worse, I think, than the middle class, but the middle class are not in great shape either.
That's right.
And everybody believes at this point that, well, it's the whatever issue of the day is the problem. That's what people seem to sort of coalesce around. Like, it's COVID's fault. Like, a lot of people actually believe it's COVID's fault that we're in this situation.
It's Russia, Ukraine's fault. It's COVID's fault. It's Trump's fault. It's everybody's fault, right?
Yeah,
except they won't look at the underlying cause.
Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, it's their fault. Like, people have this trend towards hating capitalists, and that creates this populist left uprising to try to tax the rich, which is the slogan that a lot of the like extremist left people say is tax the rich, as if the rich aren't taxed and as if that's going to solve anything. So you get this really crazy situation now where we've got the liberals and the NDPs basically making one party at this point for until 2025. And we know what's going to happen with that. We know that they're going to print more money. They're going to keep driving the costs of real estate up. They're going to keep like being against oil and gas and energy while while like demonizing oil and gas while letting Putin continue to fund his regime through through oil and gas. So like they just don't make any sense when it comes to like monetary issues. But it's so frustrating for me as a Bitcoiner who's been down this rabbit hole and disillusioned like you were about politics to see like what do we do, because the majority of Canadians don't understand the root cause of the all these problems is the money. And when you give a government too much power over both the money and like the ability to seize bank accounts, like we saw with Trudeau declaring the Emergencies Act during the trucker convoy, which is probably the biggest, like, regardless of what happened with the trucker convoy, the fact that they took that step and went that far to the extreme to violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and freeze bank accounts, that's the biggest accomplishment that the truckers could have made, to force the government's hand and not turn to violence. This is like one of the only protests that I've ever seen that never turned to violence. And I'm going to give credit to the cops too, because on their side, they didn't shoot anybody. There was a couple tear gas cans or whatever, but this was not like the G8, G20 protest in Toronto. So thank God on both sides, people had enough control of themselves. Sure, there was the horse stomping the Indigenous grandmother, like that was terrible and everything, but we didn't have it turn into like a Maidan revolution or something like that, where somebody's agent provocateur style starts shooting and then it just turns into chaos. So thankfully it resolved in a way, I think, perfectly. You got like this peaceful protest that you can say this was a peaceful protest. Nobody got violent. No cops got injured. And the government went to the extreme and declared an emergency, started freezing people's bank accounts, and really showed how crazy and authoritarian they are. So I don't know. What do you think is going to happen from this? Because it seems like the momentum's kind of dying down and, Russia, Ukraine's distracting a lot of people, but there does seem to be some momentum on even the global stage that people are starting to see Trudeau as more like a fascist, extremist left guy than this like compassionate, empathetic king of apologies that he likes to present himself as. So yeah, well, going forward, what do you think the like?
A couple of things, when you mentioned, the virtue signaling around, everything is Russia's fault, and I'm not taking sides in this conflict because I really think both are bad for different reasons. But you talk about, I don't use the word hypocrisy, but the deceptiveness of those types of politicians who virtue signal around it. Germany, for example, and other EU members bought $10 billion worth of Russian oil and gas in the last 12 days. So they'll go for us plebs, they'll hold up the flags and defend and whatever, but behind the scenes, $10 billion in businesses going there. So it's all a sham. We know it's a sham. And I think that was the biggest victory for the convoy itself. In terms of the momentum dying down, I don't know. I mean, I see the messages that come into my inbox, which is still numerous, of people saying, more, you guys need to continue. This was great. We need to go to the next step. And this article that I mentioned to you just before we started, and the two MEPs in Europe yesterday that completely chastised Trudeau and referenced the Freedom Convoy. They understand that this is not Canada, a certain segment of fringe minority Canadians versus Trudeau. This is everybody across the world that is fed up and because of the internet, now has a better understanding of our monetary policy, of our financial system, of politics. We can all now see the internet has made it so the emperors do not have clothes, and we all now understand what's going on. And Bitcoin is a great rabbit hole for that. Like if you want to understand monetary policy, it's inevitable that when you start getting into Bitcoin, you end up at the Fed 2 years later, and how they're printing money. And then you start looking to see how much money is being printed, how is it working, and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the bigger threat that they're worried about Bitcoin right now, is it's created a community that is breathing down their necks, that can now see what they're doing and understand that, unlike the traditional banking system where everything is hidden in the background and you don't know if JP Morgan is about to short, I don't know, 5 billion shares of X stock, right? To drive down the market 5% that they'll profit on. You don't know. But in the Bitcoin world, you would know, because everything is verifiable. So I think that's what they're afraid of, the fact that transparency is the future in terms of what I call finance 2.0, Bitcoin, and having this this new magical internet money. And you know what's so funny? Like I try to explain this to people who are non-techies. And again, I'm not a programmer, but I'm interested in tech and have been since a kid. I've tried to explain to some people in mainstream media, some friends of mine, that unfortunately it seems you have to be a techie or a mathematician to understand the significance of solving the Byzantine emperor's problem. Sorry, Byzantine general's problem. That this is, in my mind, and I might be wrong, but in my estimation, this is on par with the invention of the printing press. And people will not realize it for another generation, how important this was, how significant this technology is. And that Satoshi, or the team of Satoshi, or whoever was doing it, we all know the names. It wasn't, regardless if one guy started it, there were a whole bunch of developers that were helping and trying to retool, and the retooling went on for years. So these group of people that came together have solved one of the most significant problems in our modern history in terms of communication, and they've just applied it to a monetary system and built around it. It is amazing. It's going to be a while till people understand that.
Yeah, we're pretty early still. I think it's something like 1 or 2% of the world has Bitcoin. It's kind of like being on Facebook 10 years ago. You were probably like 1 out of 10 of your friends or something that had a Facebook account. And now like everybody's got a Facebook account. It's just ubiquitous. And Facebook is one of the most valuable companies in the world. So that's probably where Bitcoin is going. I see. I never really talk too much about that unless people ask specifically, because I find I'm a normal person. Like I'm not a developer. I'm an early adopter of stuff. Like I like trying new things. And I don't find it like helpful when new people ask me about Bitcoin, like how does Bitcoin mining work, or like,
Yeah.
questions like that, because it's just so complicated that it doesn't necessarily help. It's always like an evolving process of how to explain Bitcoin to somebody, especially people who are like maybe older generation or not into technology. But
Mm-hmm.
I find it's like right in your face now that inflation is here. The gas prices are going up. It's not as difficult as it is this year as it was 4 or 5 years ago to explain the value proposition of having Bitcoin to somebody. So I'm finding it's a lot easier now because of the government money printing.
Well,
Sounds
and
like
I think,
you got the spaceship coming back.
yeah, it's just fun. He drove by. I also think what's amazing, the benefit of all the chaos that our political leaders have done is, if you've noticed, at least this is my perspective, we've gotten away from, you have to buy Bitcoin because of its price and it's going to go up in value. You notice that? It's no longer that. Now it's about freedom.
Yeah.
Now it's about, look what happened to those truckers, and bank accounts got seized. I mean, people always want to know about the price. There's no question.
Yeah.
But that narrative, from what I see, is now down 90% now in favor of, well, let's talk about freedom, because we now have real concerns about our governance. And that's amazing, because if we can sell people on Bitcoin without it being the magical money that's going to 10x and make you a millionaire, that it's
100%.
just about sustaining your life and your freedoms, that's a win for us.
And that's the great thing about the Bitcoin community specifically, not crypto. And this is why most
Yep.
Bitcoiners are against crypto, and crypto people typically call Bitcoiners toxic and all this stuff, because what we like to focus on is the actual humanitarian, life-changing mission that Bitcoin or Bitcoiners or Bitcoin educators or whatever are trying to put forward into the world. It's censorship resistant, unseizable, like, if you do it right,
Yeah.
unchangeable money that no central bank, no company, no founder, nobody can mess with. And that's a lot different than like, oh, Dogecoin's a funny meme, so let's gamble on this. It's only 50 cents. Let's try to get it to $1. Or like DeFi stuff, which is a lot of venture capital type, like invest in the pre-seed deal and then go shill it out to your network and then try to get a whole bunch of money deposited in the liquidity pool, and then try to, like, rent seek fees off it and dump that on Coinbase if you're Andreessen Horowitz or whatever. And like all that other stuff is, sure, there's innovation there, and there's definitely some interesting stuff being built in the other side of crypto. There's actually interesting, like, decentralized lending protocols and things like that being built. But because they attach this speculative token to everything, it just totally makes it all about that. And you notice that there's never any real discussion in the main, like, crypto circles about, like, exposing banks for what they are and exposing the unfairness of the venture capital world itself, because that's what they're all rebuilding over there. They're rebuilding everything that's wrong with Wall Street and putting it on blockchains, and they're creating the same Cantillon effect, where the closer you are to the money printer, the more benefit you're going to get. It's basically a casino for rich people, and the small percentage of, like, speculators that have the technical know-how to go and get access. And even the people in DeFi and crypto, even the people that are genuine and that are like cypherpunks, or they're not just Wolf of Wall Street style pump and dumpers or whatever, like, I've got friends that are over in that space, and even they are really all about making money. Like, they want to make money, and they kind of, like, have turned, like, nihilistic about it because of the way that the bubble shook out in 2021, because they got outperformed by Shiba token and Hex coin and, like, all these, like pretty much just jokes and pump and dumps and stuff. They all got outperformed with their innovative, like, DeFi stuff. So even they kind of turned a bit nihilistic, and they're all just doing pre-sale deals and launching their own coins and all that to get rich.
Yeah.
So that's, like, completely separate from what Bitcoin is, and that you'll see that at the Bitcoin 2022 conference. It's all about, like, how can we help people protect themselves from power-hungry politicians using Bitcoin as, like, a shield against fascism and financial censorship and financial oppression, and how you can use Bitcoin to protect yourself personally, whether you're in a regime where they're trying to restrict your access to money, or if you're in Canada or the United States, where maybe you're not a supporter of the protest, and maybe you were actually against the Freedom Convoy protest. You believed it was white supremacists and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, like, maybe you don't think that was wrong to declare the Emergencies Act. Even you need Bitcoin. even a person who's against it and totally down the identity politics, like, Kool-Aid drinking path, and they think that it was just a bunch of fringe minority people that were, like, occupying a city and being terrorists and stuff. You need Bitcoin, because you can see your gas prices are going up, your bills are going up, you're actually getting poorer through your purchasing power, because the Canadian dollar is going down in value against scarce assets. So you need Bitcoin. Everybody needs Bitcoin. Bitcoin is for everyone, and it's for your enemies, and that's why it's so great. And I think it's
Yeah.
like only the people that are truly communists, like 100% card carrying communists, don't like Bitcoin, and even they like Bitcoin.
Yeah,
But like
exactly.
the people that are 100% actual socialists that are like, I hate owning things, I hate having things, they might not like Bitcoin. But everybody else that's just a normal person is starting to see the value of picking up the shield and protecting themselves against politicians abusing the money printer,
Hmm.
even if it's to do something like UBI, because we all know that like UBI is very popular lately, and they're probably going to do it. Like CERB was basically UBI in Canada. It was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
dry run for UBI. That's going to end up with like the same what you'd expect. They print hundreds of billions of dollars and give it out to people. It's going to rise costs.
Hmm.
Houses are going to keep going up. Your gas is going to keep going up. So you need Bitcoin to protect yourself, because it's the only thing in the world right now that you can audit the supply of by running your own node, and nobody can change the supply of Bitcoin. But like that message, it's like fertile ground right now after the trucker convoy. A lot of Canadians are very distrustful of the Canadian banking system now.
Yeah.
And we have this opportunity to go educate people who normally would just think about it, like you said, like, oh, this is just a way for people to gamble and get rich. Well, now they're starting to look like, wait, my money's not safe in the Canadian banks. Like they can actually just seize my
Or
money.
my money's not my money.
My money's not my money. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have had a couple of people like text me, like cousins and friends and
Yeah.
stuff. That are like, I took my money out. Like they're just sitting on like tens of thousands of dollars of cash just at their
So many
house
people
now.
did that. So many people did that.
And
There was a
I do
massive
think
bank run.
I think there was a bank run. It was a little bit like, I felt a bit hyperbolic during the when that happened, to be telling people
Of
like,
course. Of
you may
course.
want to take your money out or some money out, because it looks like the banks are going, like the websites are going down, and you never know, it could cause a bank run, because we basically have no reserves in our banking system in the modern banks. There's no such thing really anymore as a reserve requirement. So there's way more money out there in the system than there actually is physical money. So if everybody tried to like pull out $5,000 or something, the banks would just run out of cash, and
That's
they'd
right.
have to turn the printers on and start printing. And people are starting to realize that. So when they started to freeze accounts, it came out that there was a lot more afraid people than the Trudeau government felt. Like they were actually pushing this out there, that it was just a small fringe minority of people with unacceptable views, and it was mostly like poor, like people that didn't have any resources, and racist and misogynist and all this stuff. Well, I've got quite a few entrepreneur friends that are very normal, centrist, that don't agree with what Trudeau's doing, and actually were afraid to have their money in the Canadian banks, and they moved it out. So like 3 or 4 of my friends, they
Hmm.
weren't like posting supportive messages about the trucker convoy or anything like that. But when I was posting about the problem with a government using emergency act to like threaten people's access to money based on their posts online, with the trend of like going towards censorship and all this, that makes normal centrist people start to have a double take. So I think like for sure it backfired, and it did come out like in the House of Commons that so the what was it, the credit union president was saying that they had people take millions of dollars out of the credit unions, like
Yeah.
individuals taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars and individuals taking out millions of dollars from the bank, because they just didn't trust anymore. They left and went to like the United States or something like that with their money. So thanks for like to all the people that did this protest, for exposing the problem with the Canadian banking system. And, it's a great advertisement for Bitcoin of why we need Bitcoin, combined with the Russia sanctions. You can start to see that like entire countries are now starting to distrust central banking, Western central banks, because they can have all their assets seized too. So it definitely is like Bitcoin is becoming, in the digital age, really the only thing that you can have your wealth stored in and protected against government overreach. As populist left continues to get more power, they're going to want to grab more power and more resources to redistribute the wealth. And if you don't want to be on that end, like where you've, worked your ass off your whole life and you want to protect your assets, it makes sense for people to start thinking about looking at Bitcoin a little bit more seriously and doing self-custody.
No, I agree, and so there's a lot to unpack there. I don't get into the crypto, Bitcoin, DeFi debate, all that sort of stuff, because I think you saw throughout the convoy, my mission and my goal was unity amongst Canadians. Bitcoin is the money. That's the base layer. That's layer one money. It's the most sound thing that we have, in my opinion, and it's where everybody should be. So I kind of look at it this way. I look at, Bitcoin is the money. Let's say gold bars. It's layer one solid money, and then you have the crypto or DeFi space when you want to talk about it. And there's two different areas, multiple. One is, it's as though I'm walking into the Las Vegas casino and I'm going to go pull a slot machine, which I've never been a gambler myself. And the other is like going to the Apple store, where Apple's not a good example, but you're going to see new technology, new ideas and innovations being tested, which is great. But testing things doesn't make it money, which is why Bitcoin is always the money. And everybody in the DeFi and crypto space, everybody holds Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the money. So I think over time, I think there's going to be a slow coming together once the Bitcoin community realizes, in my opinion, that the developers in crypto, I'm not talking about the scam artists, right? But the legitimate ones, they're not a threat. They're just trying to create new technology. And I don't know that they're necessarily competing with Bitcoin. Maybe they think they are now. But I think over time they'll realize they're not competing with Bitcoin. And the space will become a lot more, palatable towards one another. So I don't really get into it. I have no problem. And I'm a free market guy, right? So if people want to go and try different things, that's great. But the evidence is there. Like when they asked Vitalik Buterin, and he says, "Oh yeah, I still hold lots of Bitcoin." Well, what does that tell you, right?
When did they ask him that?
I remember hearing. I
think that's old.
About a year ago was when I last heard it. That again, I'm not a big follower of Ethereum or Vitalik or whatever, but I just remember hearing it in a report about a year ago that he still holds quite a lot of Bitcoin. Maybe it's right. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But my guess is, if you're any person who's a practical person is going to always hedge their bets on anything, right? So if you're somebody who's come from one space and you're going to go to another one, but it's still viable money, you're never going to abandon all, whether you say it or not.
I think he's actually gotten rid of his Bitcoin, and Vitalik was very supportive of Bitcoin Cash during the fork and even leading up after the fork for 2 years.
Yeah.
So Vitalik kind of is a not a genuine person when it comes to Bitcoin.
Okay.
I think because of, and it's understandable because Bitcoiners were berating him for years. Like, we were not happy about the Ethereum project, trying to compete with Bitcoin and stuff. So for sure, Bitcoin maximalists took it to him.
Yeah.
And then so his response, game theoretically, is, well, I'm gonna try to elevate Bitcoin Cash because it's the only thing that can damage Bitcoin's network effects, so that Ethereum would have time to catch up, would be elevating Bitcoin Cash and sowing division amongst Bitcoiners and continuing to push forward the only competitor to Bitcoin, which was an attack on Bitcoin from Bitcoiners, before. So game theory goes where it's like Vitalik knows that Ethereum can't compete with Bitcoin in 2017, and it could compete with Bitcoin with Bitcoin dragged down some. So his thought there was, well, I'm going to elevate Bitcoin Cash and Roger Ver and all these folks, and then try to sow division so that we can stall Bitcoin's lead, the Lindy effect lead, and create a situation where Ethereum, we can get investment, and because the VCs are backing it with basically unlimited pools of money, Ethereum can rise up and sort of compete with Bitcoin because they were getting more developer mind share, but it would take time. So he knew that Bitcoin Cash could not compete with Bitcoin, but if he elevated the narratives of Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin and it's a better way to scale Bitcoin, then it would potentially stall Bitcoin's lead. It didn't, and
Yeah, I
it
think that's a
caused a lot of
futile
it.
exercise at this
It
point.
caused a lot of frustration, though. Like it
Yeah,
did. It
no,
definitely did cause issues that we still have the PTSD from the block size war even now.
no, totally. Yeah.
But the point about like the two communities coming together, it's just never going to happen. Like Bitcoiners are never going to. It really is a difference between financial activism and so Bitcoiners are typically financial activists and also sound money advocates. So the general populace that holds Bitcoin, for sure, they're not like financial activists or sound money advocates or whatever. They're just like trying to protect themselves with Bitcoin. They want to speculate on it. Maybe they want to save in Bitcoin. So they're definitely more open to like exploring crypto stuff.
Yeah.
But the Bitcoin educators and the Bitcoin whales and stuff like that that came here from the world of like, well, central banks are kind of committing mass fraud on the population, and Bitcoin's
the
a way
Simon
to
Dixon types. Yeah.
well, just like people like me, even it's just like lots of us came here because it's a mission. It's an activist sort of like
100%.
thing. So we will never use or personally it's like trying to get somebody from the People's Party to join the NDP or to like it's like two completely separate universes.
Let me ask you something, and I'm gonna respond to your follow up with what I think is legitimate criticism of people on the crypto end. But did you listen to that podcast with Peter on what Bitcoin did with Peter McCormick and Roger Ver? Did you ever listen to that episode?
Years ago?
It was a few years ago now.
I might have. I listened to this a while ago.
Yeah.
I might have.
I was going to ask you if you can remember what was your thought. What were your thoughts about that conversation?
Well, specifically about what?
Just in general. The idea, because I know Peter took a lot of flack for that, with good reason. And just what was your impression of it? And if you may not have any, just kind of matter of fact, it is what it is, and I moved on. Just curious.
I followed like lots of interviews that Roger was doing back then, so I don't specifically remember this one, but I do remember Peter was trying to bring on big blockers to have like debates and discussions about using large block versus Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin and everything. But I think it's completely a good idea to have open discourse and debate.
Yeah, for sure.
So I didn't have any issues with that. And I think people that say things like, oh, you're giving a platform to a scammer, I think that's stupid. That's just another form of censorship. I think we need to have people say stupid things out in the open so that you can make your own mind up. And rather than censoring the opinions and the views. But the valid criticism that some of the Bitcoin guys had was that Peter was not technically savvy enough to be able to like find where the holes in the logic was. So
I could see that.
I could
and I think Peter would admit to that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why he stopped doing it, because he realized after like 2 or 3 interviews that, there was some valid criticism there that he does not have the ability to call out the bullshit. And then he tried to bring on like Brian Trolls and like Shinobi and people like that to come and have the debates. But then this guy Hotep Jesus sort of took over there and had a few debates between BSV and BCH and Bitcoin people. And it's great when you have the debates, because Roger is a politician. Like Roger prepares talking points, and he's very good at speaking like politically, and he's very passionate. He uses appeal to emotion all the time to try to get a rise out of people and win them over emotionally. So he's basically a professional politician. And I think that whenever he says something, it's pretty disingenuous. He believes whenever he says something. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but whenever he says like something like Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin, the Bitcoin core network is no longer Bitcoin, and when he goes off on those tangents and Bitcoin is going to end up killing babies and all this just shit, like Roger was completely wrong in the end, and a lot of Bitcoiners knew it, and we were calling out his bullshit back then, and he hasn't tweeted in a year because I think partly because he was so utterly proven wrong, and partly also because he sold out his principles, where he was an early Bitcoiner that was kind of like a voluntarist kind of free markets guy, but was like super into Bitcoin. And then he started investing in pre-sales of coins like Zcash and Ethereum and all these different coins. And so he kind of had this conflict of interest internally where he was criticizing Bitcoin and Bitcoiners and Bitcoin developers for these principled reasons that I think he really believed in, and I think he was genuine, while at the other side investing in all of Bitcoin's competitors and getting pre-sale access.
During that conversation, there's one thing that always stuck out in my mind. There was a time when Peter said to him, to the effect that, okay, Roger, you created the fork, whatever. Why do you still hold Bitcoin.com? And his response was, well, because it's my legal right because I bought it. And I'm like, yeah, that's technically right, but that's not emotionally right, That becomes deceptive. And I got to tell you, there was a time where I was so confused then. I'd go to Bitcoin.com and I'd see Bitcoin Cash. I'm like, wait, I'm confused. How does this work?
Are there two rhinoceroses mating outside of your house there?
We have now the guy who's trimming the grass, and of course he's got to do it right next door.
It sounds like someone's having a good time outside the deck there.
Of all days, this is the day where they got to cut the grass in front of this place. What are you gonna do? But anyways, I just thought that is very, from a free market perspective, you're correct, but that's also deceptive and disingenuous.
100%. That was
that was my big problem.
He was lying about Bitcoin constantly, and continually pushing out fake information about Bitcoin and performing the same sort of so he was always against he was saying that Bitcoin Core was censoring free speech and debate because Thamos was deleting his posts off of the Bitcoin Talk forums, and the moderators of the Bitcoin r/Bitcoin thread or forum were deleting his posts too, because they had made up a decision that they weren't going to allow any discussion of altcoins in those two forums. And because Bitcoin Unlimited, which was before Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Unlimited was considered like out of consensus implementation of Bitcoin that had, the goal was to have bigger blocks, and that was not Bitcoin. That the debate was just going on for so long that they decided they were just going to not allow that discussion on their forums anymore. And so Roger got pissed off and said that, well, that's Bitcoin Core is censoring the open source process. But that's not true. It's like these two guys that owned that forum were censoring Roger because they wouldn't stop spamming about that issue. And so I can understand why Roger would get triggered by that, because he's also very egotistical, and rightfully so. I mean, he was early into Bitcoin, and he was a big investor into a bunch of Bitcoin companies. So I would react like that too. If I was being censored off of a forum that I was an early contributor to, I would also get upset. So I think there's some blame there for sure for triggering Roger by Thamos and the moderators of those forums, because it's not right, I don't think, to be censoring people when they just are discussing. Just let them be annoying. That would be my
believe me, look at my Twitter inbox. This entire convoy is nothing but attacks, and I'm very aggressive. You should die.
Oh my god!
Somebody's gonna kill you. Whatever. Yeah, okay, whatever. Fine. And let them vent. it's better they vent than actually do something. So yeah, I agree with that 100%. You want to know
But then
where
on the other
people's
side,
thoughts are. Yeah.
Roger, though, like I also empathize with the moderators because they're
Oh
trying
yeah,
to
for sure.
moderate this forum, and like Roger just will not stop, and he's very well resourced, so he's able to hire sock puppets and like he basically bribes people to be on his side by investing in their companies and then being an activist shareholder and sponsoring lots of podcasts like libertarian and Austrian economists and stuff like that. He would sponsor them and then go on their podcasts and lobby them to support his views. So he would have a lot of like fair weather altruistics or fair weather friends that were not altruistically like agreeing with his principles, but just more so like he was giving them talking points. And so some kind of influential nodes in the early Bitcoin days were following Roger into these debates. And like as a moderator of the forum, I can understand that would be super frustrating. So Roger goes and creates RBTC, which is like his version of our Bitcoin, but then he changes it to like BCH. So it wasn't even about Bitcoin anymore. So he was getting all this traffic to bitcoin.com and the r/BTC threads. He controlled the main Bitcoin wallet. He had invested in blockchain.info. He was an investor in Bread Wallet. So he had all these like touch points to where he was very influential in Bitcoin, and he was pushing out propaganda and lies about what Bitcoin is and about like Blockstream and how Blockstream controls Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is it's broken and bad like lies about the Lightning Network. Like he was pushing all this stupid technical stuff that just wasn't true about how the Lightning Network would never work and it was centralized. And so the block size wars were really
I know.
a big
People are
deal.
still upset about it. People
There's
are
still
still
lots of
very
PTSD.
upset.
But so then when Vitalik started aligning with that and started amplifying the message of Roger and the big blockers and really pushing forward that logic, and the venture capitalists were doing the same thing. They were like, oh, well, Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin, let the free market decide. We're not going to take a position. We like them both. Well, good Lord, like, how do you think Bitcoiners that are in this for the mission and really believe how we think decentralization is the most important thing? Because if you can't be resistant to like early Bitcoiners, you're never going to be resistant to a government. If a government decides to come down on Bitcoin, if you gave up your like block size debate or whatever to Coinbase because they're the biggest company in Bitcoin, then the government's just going to see that as a precedent. They're going to say, well, look, you changed it for when Coinbase wanted you to do it and the Chinese miners. So, we're just going to order you to do it. And then it just sets a really bad precedent. But Ethereum set the precedent themselves first, that they actually voided the decentralization of Ethereum at the very beginning when the DAO hack happened, and Vitalik chose to like collude with the exchanges to stop trading and roll back the chain to reverse the hack. So up until like that point, it was that, well, Ethereum is just a version of Bitcoin, but that can do smart contracts and it's immutable code and code is law and all this. Right away, when they had their first problem, which was like the equivalent to the Mt. Gox hack, which happened in Bitcoin pretty early.
Yeah.
Nobody reversed the Mt. Gox hack. Like we didn't get saved. I lost a shitload of money in the Mt. Gox hack and nobody saved me. But the Ethereum people chose to reverse it and basically void the immutability argument that they were pushing forward. And so that hurt them for a long time. And Bitcoiners continually point that out. So Vitalik's like, well, I'm gonna like amplify the Bitcoin Cash narrative and link my train up here with Roger for a little bit because that will help weaken the Bitcoin network effects. And they kind of did, because a lot of venture capital money just poured into like Coinbase and Brian Armstrong and Andreessen Horowitz and all those folks. They basically gave up on Bitcoin when the SegWit2x got defeated. So like Brian Armstrong never said the word Bitcoin for like 2 years after that. He just put all of his money and resources into convincing people that were Googling, how do I buy Bitcoin? It was controlled by Coinbase and Roger Ver were the top sites. When someone would say buy Bitcoin, they'd go to Coinbase or bitcoin.com. Those were pretty much the two main resources. Those two people were convincing those folks that Bitcoin was broken, Bitcoin wasn't going to scale, Bitcoin Cash was Bitcoin, Ethereum was a better version of Bitcoin because it was smart contracts. So like, but yeah, Bitcoiners are pissed off because we
Yeah,
had
I know.
these crypto guys going and pushing lies and propaganda and bad information about Bitcoin for years when Bitcoin was at its lowest, like most vulnerable moment. So that's why there's a lot of division still and
Oh
why
yeah,
it'll
for
never
sure.
get repaired.
It's like an airplane trying to take off while the mechanics are trying to disassemble the airplane simultaneously. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. But Bitcoin won in the end anyways, but the problem, the bigger problem now, because like Bitcoin Cash is no longer a threat at all, but Ethereum and crypto is more of a threat. And like the bigger game theory that you got to realize is this has never been a real fight with Bitcoiners or Roger big blockers or whatever. This really has been always about decentralization and central banks. Like the fight
Mhm.
with central banks is what the eye on the prize that Bitcoiners and Satoshi had since the beginning. It was released as a response to government overreach and central banks printing money to bail out corporations and abusing the money printer to punish, basically to reward the poor. I don't think they were reward rich people, but I don't think that they were trying to punish poor people with bailouts. Just that's
Yeah.
what happens. So Bitcoin was supposed to be a solution to that. And the fight's always been about like keeping it decentralized so that we can resist governments, and so that governments cannot censor, governments cannot stop Bitcoin, governments cannot seize Bitcoin if you hold your own keys in the proper ways.
Well, and I think that's what the Bitcoin community came together to prove during the Freedom Convoy. I mean, that was a massive win for the Bitcoin community. The fact that it was the only way that any truckers received any of the donations was through the Bitcoin network. If it weren't for that, none of them would have gotten a dime.
Oh,
And I think
that's great. Like that's cool to hear.
that's a massive win. And
So
I think that's
none of the money from Give Send Go or GoFundMe ever got
oh
distributed.
no, Give Send Go just refunded all of the donations. I think they're still in the process of doing it. And the money that was initially transferred is now in escrow for this class action suit,
All
which
right.
is, you know, how political parties and politicians try to steal money from activist groups and from people who donate. So it's all in escrow. So the only money that was able to get through was that fundraiser through Tallycoin, and which was stopped. I'm not sure why. I guess because they were worried about government behavior at that time or the rhetoric, but they stopped it at 1.2 million, I think, or 1.1 million, whatever it was. And I'm sure if they had left that fundraiser up to continue, much of the money that was seized through other means, through the other fundraising mechanisms, probably would have been a percentage of it probably would have ended up in that tally coin because the momentum was just really starting
Yeah, it was
for the
great to
tally
see
coin.
people stepping up and donating and stuff, because it was it was um it was something that like showed for sure that this wasn't just a fringe minority. It was actually a bunch of normal people were supportive of ending vaccine mandates and vaccine passports. Even people like myself who are vaccinated that
Mhm.
refuse to sort of like want to see us go towards this tyrannical way of like taking away your privileges, because where that leads to is not going to be a nice country to live in. Where that leads to is just complete compliance with whatever the popular government policy of the day is going to be. And right from the beginning, like I was very much an alarmist about coronavirus. Like I was buying hazmat suits and rebreathers and a year's supply of food and all this crap in January and February 2020
Mhm.
before most people knew what a COVID was. And you know, right from the beginning, I was, because my wife is immune compromised, so I was even extra
Okay.
paranoid about it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm not going out for like a year. I'm going to be stuck in the house. Like we're all going to be
You're
wearing
like
masks.
CGP Grey. CGP Grey was exactly like that as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
But really, like right at the beginning, I was like, but if they ever try to do forced vaccinations or vaccine passports, we have to stand up against that. We can't comply with
That's
that
right.
because it does not need to go that far. We just need to have like education. If you want to take the vaccine or not, you should take it or you should not take it. But if we just educate people about why they should take it and then they decide to take it, well, then that's how we get to herd immunity. You don't need to get the government boot out and start stomping on people's neck and force injecting them with like threatening to take away their access to like restaurants and travel and assembly and like freedom of speech and all that stuff. That's when the slip towards social credit scores is like much closer. We don't want to end up where China is, where people are basically afraid to say anything online or even in person because of social credit scores and surveillance and authoritarianism
And labor camps, right?
and labor
That's
camps. Yeah.
yeah.
So that, you know, everybody was saying obviously at the beginning, like, oh, you're crazy because we're not going to be wearing masks in North America. That's, you know,
Of
we won't be doing
course.
that. And you're,
Conspiracy theorist,
yeah,
you?
you're crazy. They won't shut down schools. This is just a cold. And
Yeah,
also, oh, you're crazy. They'll never force you to take a vaccine. So like I got hit with everything from all sides because I
I'm
was
sure.
I was like both. I was trying to play both sides. I'm a Bitcoiner for one, so all the Bitcoin people were attacking me, being like, "It's just the flu. Don't worry about it." Like
Yeah.
you're an authoritarianist if you support wearing a mask. I'm like, no, man. Like, look at this shit. Look at these videos coming out of China. This shit's crazy. But
Yeah.
turns
I
out I
gotta
don't know
ask you
what the hell that was.
I gotta ask you something about that, like, and that kind of parallels something else when you say they're Bitcoiners, so well, just take it, whatever. And I mean, I'm vaccinated as well. It's not about taking it or not taking it. It's about the coercion and the
Mm.
penalty if you don't abide by the government, and then the tracking on top of it. But something else I noticed, this came up at Bitcoin last year when Laura Loomer showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it wasn't popular, but I was actually cheering her. And the reason I was cheering her is, like, I don't think Jack Dorsey is an evil guy. I think he means well. I think maybe he might be a little lost or just have a different philosophical worldview, which is fine. But the fact that we're all about freedom, libertarian, free market, whatever, and everything's on Twitter,
Yeah.
like it makes me a little bit crazy. Like, guys, if we're gonna be free market people, we need to be on a freedom platform. And I don't know what
Well,
that platform is, but can you speak to that?
yeah, man, this is something that, and by the way, like I also was cheering for her for the interruption, kind of like it's a relevant conversation, and I
Yeah,
reached out to Peter McCormick afterwards, and I was like, dude, you got to bring her on your podcast so she can have a microphone, and he's like, oh, you're great, like he thought I was joking, like just making fun of him because he
yeah.
kind of like went up and spoke to her. I'm like, no, man, like she needs to have a voice here, like it's best if she gets to speak her mind. So I think he did end up bringing her on the podcast.
He did, and you know what? He said I was if I was going to say anything to Peter McCormick, because he said he doesn't know if he's going to have her on because he disagreed with her views and blah blah blah. I mean, whether you agree with her views, I know where she gets a lot of her information, and she gets them from embassies. She actually has credible information. But whether you agree or not, I thought that was his best podcast,
Yeah, it was
because here he
great.
had they had completely different worldviews, and they
Yeah.
had to somehow come together and find where they agree and where they disagree. It was amazing, and I was like,
I love
"No, Peter,
conversations
do
like
more of
that.
that." Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, do more of that. You
And
know?
that was what people were talking about with the Bitcoin Cash, big block, small block stuff too. It was like there was a lot of people that were like, let's just have the conversation. But, you know, it's not like Laura. So, like, Laura's not intellectually dishonest. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
she really is trying to have like, educate and speak about issues she cares about. And a lot of
Yeah,
the folks that were like, when you start adding money into the mix and like,
changes
when
things. Yeah,
like it just it changes your incentives and the conversation becomes a little bit less genuine. Like, you know, the Bitcoin SV sort of like gigablock research was funded by Enchain, which was Craig Wright's company with Calvin Ayre. So he was funding a lot of research to go into the big block stuff. So he was basically paying people to have these opinions and then go on and debate with Peter, where Peter didn't really have the technical know-how to be able to
yeah,
point out where the nuance of the bullshit was. And I don't either. Like, that's the thing. Like, having conversations with people about those types of things, it can also be detrimental in a way, because a lot of noobs listen to his show, and like if he's not calling out bullshit where someone else might be able to, then I could see how that could be looked at as like a little bit damaging rather than helpful. But to talk to your original point about Twitter, so there's quite a few Bitcoiners that are actually against censorship of Jack Dorsey's Twitter censorship, and we've kind of had that. Like, Bruce Fenton is a guy that I really admire, and he's a friend of mine. He runs a Satoshi Roundtable. He's a freedom maximalist, like libertarian, from
Cool.
New Hampshire, like live free or die.
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So like on Clubhouse one time, Jack came into the room, and Bruce let him have it, and on the Clubhouse room, and it was funny. Bruce got banned from the Clubhouse, from the Bitcoin Club, and he's like one of the biggest Bitcoin guys. So, you know, like afterwards I was like, dude, unban Bruce. Like Bruce, you know, that's a valid opinion that people need to have. Like, you know, censorship is not great. But so there's two things there that, one, there have been efforts to try to get off of Twitter. So Bitcoiners have tried to use things like Mastodon to set up their own servers and bring people over to like whatever platform. But the network effects of Twitter are undeniable. Like everybody's on Twitter. So the dopamine hit you get from seeing 1,000 likes on a post is unfortunately one of the valid reasons why people stay on Twitter. So it's just the network effects are real. Like the Lindy effect is a legitimate phenomenon in I don't know, economics or sociology or whatever, where the longer a network is dominant, the more likely it is to stay dominant. That is one of the main reasons why none of these other platforms have picked up for Bitcoiners. So there's that. Then the other thing is that Jack Dorsey gets a pass, or now he's like very, very much lauded by Bitcoiners. Like we all love him because he quit Twitter and he's focused on Bitcoin Lightning Network and stuff. But before that, when he was just starting to talk about Bitcoin, he wasn't like publicly out there giving the Bitcoin maximalist pitch and like really understanding the value of Bitcoin. We started to give him a pass probably a couple of years ago because he started to say things that we felt was genuine, at least myself, and I know others as well, that like he does not like to be in the position where he has to censor and he has to like
I would agree with that.
Policies.
I would agree with that assessment. Yeah.
A lot of people were like, oh, Jack Dorsey's like kind of like he's the problem because he runs Twitter censors the conservatives, and you know Jack Dorsey's he's disingenuous, and you know what he's just not somebody we should amplify, blah blah blah. But I really do like give people the benefit of the doubt. When I feel like they're honest, I will listen to them and believe what they say, for unless they're trying to shill me a coin or something like that. But I feel like he was.
So if he comes out with Jack Dorsey coin, he's like, oh, that's right.
He's out. Yeah, no, I feel like he was genuine about that specific thing, that he did not build Twitter to try to like become this powerful censor board to be able to choose what people said and didn't say. Like he is a big problem for him, and he would like prefer if Twitter was decentralized so that he would not be able to censor, and it would be all left up to the community to govern censorship and all that stuff. So when he started talking about that and kind of admitting that censorship was a problem, and you know he's running a public company, so he has to make decisions based on fiduciary duty and all that stuff, and he's excited about Bitcoin because Bitcoin is actually helping solve that problem.
Yeah.
Then a lot of us started to kind of like see the nuance in Dorsey and sort of change the perception, because he was actually changing. Like he was making a significant mental shift that a lot of us had recognized, that we're disillusioned by politics and disillusioned by censorship and stuff, and there's not really much you can do about it except for build an alternative system that is resistant to censorship.
Like Parler. Remember Parler? Build an
Yeah,
alternative. Okay, they did. All right, shut down the
yeah,
alternative.
exactly.
I mean, that was in my mind, that was the technical equivalent to the Freedom Convoy for
Yeah, exactly.
exposing how the tech industry try to monopolizes everything and how our government tries to monopolize everything in terms of monetary policy and people's opinions. But
And here's the parallel from Parler, the Freedom Convoy, um, Ethereum, and crypto versus Bitcoin. So the same way that the game theory made sense for Vitalik to elevate Bitcoin Cash while they were trying to build their network effects
mhm.
is exactly what Wall Street elites, for lack of a better term, like the financially powerful people that have an interest in keeping the status quo and keeping their finger on the money printer, and like what Freeland says of continuing to be able to do cognitive state capture. The people that are in that power position, central bankers, politicians that believe in these different agendas that maybe not respect individual liberties and property rights, and maybe not so tolerant of those views. I don't go down the WEF rabbit hole. Like, I just kind of feel like that's not super credible, but like it's definitely clear that there's an agenda that in the past powerful people have gotten together and kind of created paradigms that have shaped the world for 20, 30, 40 years, like the Bretton Woods Agreement. No conspiracy there. Like, all the allies got
Mhm.
together and they created this system where everybody would just use the US dollar because they had the most gold, and then they wouldn't fight with each other. They wouldn't compete with each other in currency wars. They would just use the US dollar to settle global trade. And in return, the United States would protect them and give them access to the United States market, which was probably the most undamaged from war at that point.
Yeah.
And so, like the Bretton Woods system, it's no conspiracy. That was how US dollar hegemony started. And it was an organization of all these powerful folks. Then there was 1971, when Nixon took the United States off the gold standard, which was kind of a violation of the Bretton Woods Agreement, but it was this
Yeah.
new paradigm of fiat money, not backed by gold anymore. We're just going to all print. And it created this new kind of petrodollar system where there was an allegiance with the Saudis to
Yeah.
provide them with protection and stuff in exchange for settling oil in dollars, even though it was no longer backed by gold. So there was these different monetary paradigm shifts, and Bitcoin throws a wrench in those plans. So
Mhm.
they want to do another one, and it's no wonder why. Like, modern monetary theory and CBDCs, central
Oh
bank
God.
digital currencies, are
Yeah.
where they're looking to go with this,
That's
because
right.
the current system is unsustainable. The current debt loads are insane, and everybody's doing it. Like, all the major countries are doing this money printing. They're all like, central banks are monetizing the government debt with the commercial banking system, increasing the wealth gap. They realize that if they keep doing this, it's going to cause populist uprisings all over the world. We're already seeing protests everywhere.
Yeah.
People don't understand why they're protesting 100%. They understand there's rising prices and censorship and all these problems, but they don't really go down to the rabbit hole of seeing that it's all related to the money printer. So governments need to be able to push forward these policies, this new paradigm, whatever they want it to be, but they can't with Bitcoin. They know that Bitcoin competes. Bitcoin is sound money.
Mhm.
Bitcoin allows people to opt out of their control and store their wealth and take back their sovereignty and start thinking differently, and thinking more towards long-term conservative, financially conservative, um, sound money principles, which they cannot stop because it's too late for them to stop. They could have stopped it 5 years ago, but they didn't think it was a big enough threat. So they did the same thing they did to Donald Trump. They called him a lunatic that shouldn't have his finger on the nuke button because he was going to start nuclear
Yeah.
war and all this stuff. That was the strategy that came out after, I think, WikiLeaks leaked it,
Mhm.
that like that's what they had done. They were just going to push that narrative so that it would be easier for Hillary to win.
Yeah.
Well, they did the same miscalculation with Bitcoin. They said it was just for drug dealers, and it was just a joke currency and all this. When it was small and it was actually possible to shut it down, they could have. But now that we've gone through these multiple battles with block size wars where the early Bitcoiners, the early Bitcoin miners, the big businesses, they failed to bring Bitcoin down. The venture capitalists, the crypto guys, and the Chinese government failed to bring Bitcoin down. Elon Musk failed to bring Bitcoin down. ESG is kind of like the current attack, but we had all-time highs in the network after the major attack in 2021. So all this to say, like, Bitcoin is now to the point where it's resistant enough to governments that it cannot be stopped. And they all know this. And like back in even 2014, 15, when Ross Ulbricht was being tried for the Silk Road case, Katie Hahn was one of the lead prosecutors on that case, actually prosecuting the corrupt government agents who stole the Bitcoin and pretended to be Silk Road admins. She is now a GC at Andreessen Horowitz Crypto Fund, and she's a seed investor of Coinbase. She made $70 million off the Coinbase IPO last year. She admitted in an interview a couple of years ago that she was tasked with taking Bitcoin down. Like, the New York Attorney General's office wanted Bitcoin stopped. Yeah. So this came out in the interview. But she realized that, like, Bitcoin was decentralized. You can't stop it. So then they said, okay, go after all the businesses. So she went after, like, these different, not her personally, but the New York government went after these different businesses. Charlie Shrem went to prison over his involvement with the Bit Access, I think it was called. But that was the early government attack. So this is a long way around, sorry, to get to the point, but giving context and building up why Bitcoiners and crypto people will never get along. Because what we see is that...
Listen, we got Quebecers and Albertans hugging each other. I don't know how, but at some point there's got to be a time where people accept each other's differences.
Sure.
And
give you that, but not work together as in, like,
oh no, I'm not necessarily saying
crypto.
That. No. It's not a fairy tale book. I'm not saying that.
But here's the ending of this circle. So the same way that Bitcoin can't be stopped because BitTorrent can't be stopped now, it's just you can make it illegal to download movies and pirate things, but you can't enforce it when millions of people are doing it. Bitcoin is now decentralized enough at the base layer, and there's enough people holding Bitcoin that you will get a lot of resistance to laws written about Bitcoin, negative laws about Bitcoin. Plus, it's technically impossible to stop Bitcoin and force protocol changes to enforce sanctions lists and stuff like that. Like, there's no way that they can make it so that certain Bitcoin addresses will have to be frozen on the Bitcoin network. Now, on crypto, it's mostly centralized. There are individuals that can be brought in front of Congress and grilled, just like Jack Dorsey, just like Zuckerberg, that can be forced to install surveillance software and log a lot of information and build surveillance networks of who's what and what addresses are linked, and then enforce KYC AML stuff on the protocol, basically on the protocol, not technically on the protocol, but even technically on the protocol. They can be forced to fork in censorship surveillance software at the protocol level. They can be forced to fork out protocols like Uniswap or Aave or whatever, Tornado Cash, whatever protocol does not fit within their control of being able to completely surveil everything and monitor the network and have complete grip on the network like they do the financial system. Joe Lubin, Vitalik Buterin, as an example for Ethereum, they can be hauled into Congress. They can be threatened with an ultimatum to say, you're either going to enforce this or you're going to go to jail. Now, this is an unlikely scenario to happen. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but this can happen. There's no way they can do that with Bitcoin. There's nobody in Bitcoin that they can force to make any protocol changes to Bitcoin. We've already resisted the government once. We resisted the internal struggle of the biggest miners. We resisted the Chinese government banning Bitcoin mining. So there's been a lot of tests Bitcoin has had. Ethereum has not had any of those big tests. In fact, the biggest test that it had already was the one they failed. It was when the DAO hack happened, and it was immutable code that was executed properly as the code was written to execute. Somebody just decided to execute the code in a way that stole Vitalik's money. They rolled it back. So they've already proven the litmus test has failed. They've proven that they can do it. Now, they take extra steps in the crypto world to make it appear like they're decentralized.
Yeah.
So there was another hack that happened 2 or 3 years ago that Polkadot's founder, Gavin Wood, was a victim of, and they lost 50 million, 100 million, something like that. But the Ethereum core team and Vitalik and all those guys chose not to roll that one back, because they got this new, it's like the workplace accident clock, you know, and it's like X days until an accident happened, right? They don't want to reset that clock back to 0 days until so they're going on this, like, you know, they got this thing running now where it's like, oh, it's been like 4 years since we've had an immutability accident.
The workday accident clock.
So like that's literally what they can choose to roll it back. They already did it, but they're just choosing not to, so it can appear like there's no accidents happening. So the big thing is that, like, JP Morgan, UBS Bank, MasterCard, all these main VCs that already control and censor the Web 2.0, Andreessen Horowitz, all these guys that are in control of the current cluster of privacy and surveillance that is the current internet and Web 2.0, have invested directly into the Ethereum Foundation and Consensus. Somebody like this, somebody from the WEF board sits on the Ethereum Foundation. Like there's a couple of people, and one of them is a WEF member. A lot of these crypto guys go to Davos, not saying anything conspiratorial about that. Like I have friends that have been to Davos, like in the crypto space, and they're not lizard people or whatever, but they're part of the agenda, you know, like they want to be part of the conversation. So all this to say that if you were in power, if you were a central bank, if you were somebody that's close to the money printer and wants to be able to continue to retain that stranglehold grip on the financial system so you can continue to enforce your will on the population silently through financial controls, would you elevate Ethereum and crypto? Or would you elevate Bitcoin?
Yeah, and for me, it's a hard question to answer even conceptually, because like I don't care about power. I don't care about controlling stuff. Like let people do what people want to do, right? That's the whole essence of the free market, is we're all allowed to be different, and we all have sovereignty over our decisions as well as our money. So the whole concept of, I mean, I saw a lot of this in politics. That's really what turned me away. There are certain people that are just absolutely obsessed with power. And I tell people often, people ask me, what's politics like and why are you so disillusioned? I say, watch House of Cards. Wow, there is so much truth in that show. And even down to like the backstabbing text messages, you're getting a message from somebody in the party, you're not sure if they're trying to bait you into something or not. Like, it's just crazy, man.
Yeah, that's, well, I guess I'll answer the question for you, since I was a leading question anyways. I was basically, the point was that they can't stop Bitcoin, but they can slow down Bitcoin's network effects to the point where they can elevate something else that they can control. They can't control Bitcoin. They can't stop Bitcoin, but they can elevate crypto. They can elevate Ethereum, all these centralized platforms that then they can use as a test bed for you will own nothing and be happy.
And they will own everything and they'll be happy.
Like, what do you think owning land in the metaverse is? People are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on virtual JPEGs and land in the metaverse.
Yeah.
You own nothing. You own nothing, and you're happy about it because your favorite celebrity is also pumping that shit. Yeah. And it's all centralized, and the banks are already in control of it, and the venture capitalist firms, the Silicon Valley elites or whatever, they're already in control of Web 2.0. Now they're in control of Web 3.0. So we believe that the mission of Bitcoin, which is like a shield against inflation, a shield against money printing, privacy, sovereignty, a way for the billions of people that live under financial oppression to actually take back some control and escape capital controls and financial oppression by holding your own coins. that is under threat by crypto, by Ethereum, by DeFi, by Web3. All this stuff is antithetical to what Bitcoin is because it's already co-opted. It's already being elevated by WEF members and central bankers and
Yeah.
commercial banks and venture capitalists that have control everything else. So we're very hesitant and resistant. It's not hesitancy. It's complete resistancy
Yeah.
to what we perceive as a game theoretical attack on Bitcoin, in the same way that Vitalik was elevating Bitcoin Cash during the block size wars. The powerful 0.1% folks that hate Bitcoin are pumping, or supporting and elevating network effects of crypto and Ethereum so that they can convince more people. Not they can convince, but that they can let the free market work its magic there and have all these people incentivized to promote network effects and promote the thesis that, Ethereum is like Bitcoin, except it's faster and it can do smart contracts. And before
Mhm.
you know it, their hope, I believe, is that more people engage with and choose to go over to the crypto side than they choose to use Bitcoin. And then they can actually stop the network effects of Bitcoin from becoming so powerful that it disrupts their ability to use the money printer.
And
And it's
it's so
it's
weird.
the
It's so
only
weird
free
because
market. Go ahead.
everybody I know that, like, I do know, I have friends that are like friend in particular. He just, like I've told him, he just no, he's trading and all that sort of stuff, but he denominates everything now in Bitcoin. So when I explained to him that, okay, it's you're trading whatever, blah blah blah, but you realize all you're trying to do is get more Bitcoin, right? And even he acquiesced and said, well, yeah, of course. Okay.
See, it's not like I believe they're right about the free market stuff. It's just I'm looking at this from the perspective of the biggest nodes in the network, like
Yeah.
Bank of America and JP Morgan and big like CNBC and Bloomberg, all the major information nodes that do the same propaganda with politics and
Hmm.
social issues and stuff. They will push bad information. Like, to me, it's the same as CBC, like amplifying and parroting Trudeau's fringe minority comments as if
Yeah.
that's the reality of the convoy. It's the same as
Agreed.
CNBC and Bloomberg and Bank of America putting out research saying how Bitcoin's bad for the environment. Ethereum's proof of stake is good for the environment. We should use this cryptocurrency. It's better for our agenda for global warming in 2030, whatever. It's the exact same thing to me. It's all disingenuous bullshit. And it really is about, they don't want to lose power. They don't want to lose the grip over people to control how they think and act and how they store their money.
Yeah.
So normal people aren't participant in complying in this. They're not even aware of it. Like, most people don't even think that deeply about the news sources they watch or the money that they use.
They're too
So
busy.
it's yeah, and it's like we've got lots of problems that we've got to deal with. We got a tax season coming up here. Everybody's stressing about that, and you got coronavirus to be afraid of. Like, Russia-Ukraine war is kind of like the latest thing, but yeah, we're always distracted and kind of like, look away at this. Don't look behind the curtain. Nothing to see over here. Don't start looking at how the
It's
money's made.
it's the dog from Up. Squirrel. You know. So
But anyways,
all right.
that's I hope that big long way around maybe gave you some context in how some of us think about using Twitter, even though there's censorship problems there, and why we're not so much into the crypto narratives and kind of
Yeah, for
vehemently
sure.
against the crypto narratives.
I mean, believe me, like I'm not. I don't consider myself in the Bitcoin community because I don't have the knowledge that you guys do. But watching this the entire time, from the bleachers, as somebody who was buying Bitcoin, it was just frustrating. It was so. And I'm not blaming the Bitcoin community for it. I'm a believer that the fact that you have small blocks that take longer to verify, that is a feature. And Lightning, I think, is going to be, over time, people will realize that that really can be a viable solution, as we saw
Yeah.
with, like, there was, I went to that tally coin. I only was on the page 3 or 4 times because I'm so busy. I just wanted to see the comments and people donating, $1 from Mombasa and stuff like that. Like it was amazing. So
Nice.
yeah, man.
Yeah, it's like the most important thing is government resistance and decentralization, because if you don't have that,
Right.
you get the same parlor treatment. You can appear to be decentralized until the source of the traffic just decides to turn you off. That can happen with anything that chooses to like prioritize speed or features over decentralization. And yes, Bitcoin is not perfect for things like small payments yet, but there's ways to do like use other blockchains to do 50 cent or $1 payments and pay barely any fees or no fees at all. But they're not decentralized and they don't have the other network effects. And the choice that we made to keep Bitcoin decentralized above all else and then scale on second layers, it definitely made it so that it was going to take more years to get to the point where Bitcoin is peer-to-peer cash in a way that anybody anywhere can use for cheap, to be able to help people in like India and China and Africa and stuff like that be able to evade financial oppression and not have to pay an arm and a leg for it,
That's right.
while also allowing it to be like the most decentralized settlement layer that we have. So for sure, it's like, it's kind of frustrating to see as well. I had a bit of cognitive dissonance around that block size debate because I was one of those guys that came in like peer-to-peer cash. I wanted to see cheap, free, instant payments. It was so cool to be
Yeah.
able to have like PayPal, but without the company. And then when
Yeah.
I saw fees rising, I was like, ah, shit, like this isn't going to work out the way that I thought it was going to work out. And I'm going to have to wait like 5 or 10 years before we can get to the point where it's like what Bitcoin was in 2011. When I was first using Bitcoin in 2011, it was basically free to send a payment, because I
Yeah.
don't think at that point the miners were even charging, because the 50 block reward was enough. They didn't need to charge. So there was a little while there where they didn't even charge a fee at all. But then also the price of Bitcoin was $5 or $10. So it was like,
That's right.
even if it was a 0.5 Bitcoin fee, you know, it was like $2 or something.
Exactly.
But yeah, you're definitely right. Like, we need more people to be embracing like decentralized technology. And now we've got a whole bunch of stuff coming that you're going to be probably meeting with these folks at Bitcoin 2022, like people that are building impervious AI, and like JP Sears and Justin Resvani are building Zion Network on top of Bitcoin. You can do peer-to-peer messaging, you can do video calls. Like on top of Lightning Network, you can do a lot of stuff. Like John Carvalho's building something with Tether where it's decentralized identity on Bitcoin. So you can then build those networks of trust where you can just downrank that person that's sending you death threats in your Twitter DMs on this network. And then just, you know,
I
you're
got a
not
bunch of people
censoring
to
them.
downrate.
You just downrank them, and then like they have a little
Yeah.
like, you know, they're less relevant in your personal network. It's like that's the solution, because maybe that person's just triggered by you, but maybe they're a good person, and in their
Yeah,
own
these
network.
death threats from Justin Trudeau are ridiculous. But it's a joke.
But yeah, man,
All
like
right, brother.
if you want, I'd be happy to make intros for anybody that's doing, like, if you have you spoken to Justin Resvani or JP Sears yet about Zion?
No, I mean I know the names obviously, but I haven't, started stalking people yet and say, "Tell me about this." That's I want to go, with a clear
Yeah.
head into the conference. I'm sure going to be like anybody who goes there for the first time, overwhelmed with how much information is going to be available, and just try to meet as many people and talk to them and just get a base understanding and some people that I can follow up with after. And because we have some more initiatives that we're going to launch, where we're going with where the Freedom Convoy left off. So there's going to be, I think, some opportunity for these two segments of our society, the freedom monetary people and the freedom constitutionalist people, to start to come together, which is what I'm trying to build right now.
Well, I'd be happy to continue having conversations with you and make introductions on
For
the
sure.
Bitcoin side, because
Cool.
like, you're right, we do need to decentralize these things. And up until now, it's been a lot of altcoins and alt blockchains and stuff where they're like building decentralized video or decentralized social networks or whatever, and then they have a coin and they do an ICO. Like, you don't need to do that. You can build all this shit on Bitcoin without all that coin stuff. You don't need to put speculative, like, pump and dump tokens on top of every application using decentralization. And so Bitcoiners, we're finally at the point now where there's 3 or 4 really exciting freedom maximalist technologies built on Bitcoin that allow for decentralized censorship resistant messaging and video and all this stuff. Happy to make intros there. Have a great time at the conference. Should be fun. I'm kind of jealous. I'm protesting the vaccine passport. It's my contribution. So I haven't used it yet, man. Like, I got the vaccines, but I ripped up the passport when they gave it to me. I'm like, I'm not using this shit to go to a restaurant. Or I'm kind of living like somebody who haven't gotten vaccinated since September. And yeah, it sucks. It's like, I'm not able to do shit. So I feel like I'd be voiding my principles if I like went now after protesting the vaccine passport for so long. I feel like I got to wait until they lift them, because I don't know, it just makes me feel like I don't know.
And we have to put that, and they still haven't lifted them. They still have mandates, although they're talking. We need to continue to put pressure on the government that this is not tall. And thankfully, there are MEPs in Europe right now that are just destroying them based on these unconstitutional laws. And I would like to, whenever we get another government, I would love Pierre Poilievre, if he becomes leader of the Conservative Party. If he does and he's successful, we need to start talking about a royal commission and an investigation and prosecutions of people who violated constitutional law, because we cannot go on being a country that always just turns a blind eye after a new government gets in power. Just ignore it, sweeping it under the rug. Like, no. We're an embarrassment on the global stage now. We need to show that we don't tolerate this behavior from our politicians.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. We did 2 hours here, and if you ever have any questions, intros you need or whatever, just send me a message.
For sure. Well, we'll be in touch anyways. I'm sure we're going to cross paths and spaces, and maybe we should do one together sometime soon. And I don't know if you've discovered this app that Glenn Greenwald uses called Call-In. It's another competitor to Spaces. It's actually really good. I built a profile on it. I suggest you take a look at it, because it basically formats each space into like its own podcast. Cool. Take a look at it. And I think that might be a good opportunity for Bitcoin people to go into the Call-In platform.
Right on. Well, I will take a look at it. Yeah, I'm glad we talked and got into the weeds about all the like crypto versus Bitcoin stuff, because like I really look at you as, and like, Transplender and all these other folks that I've kind of just come to look at or just come to learn about in this like fight for respecting the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and ending vaccine passports and stuff, as influential nodes in that network, which is
cool. That's
extremely
that's a huge compliment that most normies will have no idea what you just said. But I really appreciate it. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man, you did. You got a good. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, a good influential node is probably a good way to phrase it. And I think that you could definitely help be a bridge between people who never would have thought about Bitcoin because they looked at it like a investment. That's it.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin, which, the real Bitcoin, the thing that we're all working for, which is decentralization and censorship resistance and sovereignty and things like that. So the fact that you're into Bitcoin is great. And yeah, would love to continue having nuanced conversations about why the rest of it's bullshit.
Cool. And I'm going to have to get myself a t-shirt and a hat that says influential node.
Influential node.
All right, brother.
All right. Thanks,
I'll talk
BJ.
to you soon. Okay, man.
Bye-bye.